You know, the trifecta of creativity. George coined that term. What is it? Well, it's the Brother Print Motor Printer, the Stellaire or the Luminaire, and the Brother Scan and Cut. Using all three of those, we can create some fabulous stuff. I came up with a memory quilt, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. I think it's fabulous with reverse applique. I printed out some cartoons from my childhood with the printer on fabric, who knew? And reverse applique makes them look stunning in this quilt. I'm going to give you the directions for the quilt, but I'm going to show you how to do reverse applique. And it's going to be easy. It's going to come out perfect because the scan and cut, well, it's really going to help us get just right. I'm Cathy. This is Sewing Tech Talk. Join me. We're going to play and do a memory quilt. So now applique. You probably know what applique is if you're watching. What it is, it's taking one fabric and putting it on top of the other. So I think it's a French word, and I think it means putting one fabric on top of the other. So I've done that lots and lots of times. There's lots of videos that I've used, and I've used scan and cut with a lot of those because it's great for cutting out appliques, especially embroidery appliques. I'm just talking about a regular applique right now. We're going to sew it down manually, so a regular applique, you've seen me do this before. I printed this on the printer, which is pretty awesome. I took my artwork and put it on the printer and made a kaleidoscope background. And this is just a basic zigzag applique putting it down. Now, I was thinking about a memory quilt though, and on a memory quilt, in fact, this was getting ready to go in as a regular applique. You can see I trimmed it really close to the edge, and it was going to go down and be appliqued down. But I kind of don't like that for pictures. I want pictures to look like they're framed. And that's what reverse applique does. So in reverse applique, here's an example. Here's my grandmother. And you can see that this is the background fabric, but it's on the top. So what happens is you make a window in this fabric, and then this printed fabric that I made of my grandmother, it went underneath. And we're going to stitch around this outside edge to hold it down. Instead of stitching on the picture, we're going to stitch pretty much and grab that background. But there's a problem with reverse applique that you usually don't run into with regular applique. So in regular applique, here's your background and here's the applique piece that goes on the top, right? Well, what this is, this can move. And so the top piece is pretty stable, but the top piece, well, you have to fuse it down or put some stabilizer behind it or something. Now, in reverse applique, this piece, still flimsy, so you have to stabilize it, will go on the back. And then you have to make sure it fits. You can see it through the window. The top piece of fabric, now they can both move, right? So this can move if you don't stabilize the heck out of it. So I thought about that, and I didn't want to put a ton of stabilizer in, so the scan and cut comes to the rescue. And let me show you how this idea came to me. I was doing a little jigsaw puzzle, and as I put the last piece in the puzzle, what occurred to me was that if these two the applique piece and the outside piece fit just like they would in a puzzle, well, that would give me minimum stabilizer, and they would be perfectly positioned, and it would be super easy. So let me show you what I came up with. We'll put the jigsaw puzzle to the side. Now I have a handout for this, and I have a handout for all of, I have a handout for all of my my videos. So it talks you through this process. So as I'm going through this process, pretty simple, but there you have the instructions. Now what I also did is I figured this needed to be great for a memory quilt. So I came up with a little design for a quilt, and here's just a blow up of that. I made this one. and I put little insets of pictures, my cartoons that I liked as when I was a kid, and I put them in here. And I thought even these little like the yellow dots, I called it connect the dots, would be great for a picture also. So you could have all kinds of just memory pictures in there. It would be really cool. So the handout, go get the handout, and it's moresew.com/shop, but the link will be in the description of the video. So here's what I think we need for this. So we need 2 different rings of stabilizer. Remember, I don't want a lot of stabilizer in there, right? So 2 rings of stabilizer. This inner ring will go on the picture, and this outer ring will go behind the fabric. And I knew you were coming, so I already got that done. So here's the fabric that I'm going to put on the outside, and I put a ring of stabilizer there. Notice the outside edge is square, right? But inside I made it a fancier shape. That's where the scan and cut's going to come in. Now here's the little picture, the little cartoon I printed out on fabric. On the back of it, I hope you can see, there is that inner ring. And the inner ring matches the outer ring exactly. So that's the key to using scan and cut. It helps you pre-position the stabilizer both on the background fabric and on your image, and when they go together they fit like that jigsaw puzzle piece. Pretty neat, right? And it's pretty easy to do. So I'll get this ready, but let me show you on the scan and cut how simple it is to get this done. So here's my little cartoon that I'm going to put the ring around. So here it is, and I'm going to take my measuring, and I'm going to measure the size that I want my opening to be. I want to measure exactly what I want my opening when I decide exactly what opening I have. So here it is, and I'm going to measure the width, and the width of the opening should be about, let's just say about 4 3/4. The height should be about, maybe 3 3/4. So now let's go to the scan and cut and just show you how simple it is to create these 2 rings. So I'm going to come up to the scan and cut, and let me come around so I can see. So I'm going to choose just the basic shapes. Now I have all these different shapes to choose from. There's pages and pages and pages and pages of shapes to choose from. I chose this one. Now could I have chosen this one or even another fancy shape? I could. But these little edges might be a little bit tricky to stitch around. I could do it, and then I have to fold the fabric to the back. So I just picked a simple shape just to check it out. Now, here's that exact shape, and I want to make it 4 3/4 wide. So all I do is do plus 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 to 4 3/4. That'd be 4.75. And the height, I want it to be at 3 3/4. So I have to take that down just a little bit. Now that's the exact size. Set. Now what it does is it brings it up on my mat, and what I want to do is I want to take it and I want to, I'll put it over here just a little bit so you can see, I want to put an inner ring. Remember, I want that inner ring to go on the piece that's going to be underneath. So it's simple. I go to Edit, I go to Object Edit, I want to do an offset, which puts an offset on the outside, but I want it on the inside. So let's go minus, and I usually take it about 1/3 of an inch. It really doesn't matter. There we go, that's pretty good, and I'm going to say OK. Now I have these 2, and what I want to do is I want to put a square around this. This is the piece, the frame that's going to go on my outer piece of fabric. OK. I want to say OK. I want to add from the basic shapes. I want to add a square. I always use a square because I can tell if it's lined up with the edges of my fabric. Now I can change it, but let's just show you a simple way. We're going to go Set. Now there it is. I'm going to take it, I'm going to move it sort of on top, and it's not big. It's not big enough, right? No problem. We're going to go Edit, and then we're going to go Move it, and then you see these 2 little X's right there? I got pretty close. Let's bring it up a little bit closer, and I want to move it so the 2 X's are right on the top of each other. Pretty darn close. Okay. Okay. Now let's make this square big enough. So we're going to go increase the size, and all we have to do is do a visual. So we want it wider, and we want it taller. So you can see that red box around the other two. Okay. Now that's really all I have to do my basic, cut out my frame. But what if I'm doing multiples? What if I'm doing a memory quilt and I want a lot of these? No problem. I'm going to select all of them. Okay. And then I'm going to go Object Edit, and I'm going to group them. So now all become one. And if I want to cut multiples, all I have to do is go here, say I want another one, okay, and then move that one down. And I can fill up an entire mat full of these if I'm doing a bigger quilt. And that's what I want to come up and tell you about a mat now. So I'm using the fabric mat. And what that is, of all of the scan and cuts, it's the stickiest. And that means I'm just putting my stabilizer on there. I'm using the Floriani Heat and Stay Medium Tearaway, and it fits on there beautifully. I'm also using the Rotary blade. And the Rotary blade is made for cutting like a thin fabric. So all I have to do is put it in the machine. This is the Scan and Cut 325 DX 320. It's one of those. Okay, so there we go. Put it in there, and the machine knows what I've put in. It's all set up. It knows how thick my thin fabric is, and it's going to cut it perfectly. And I have it on this super sticky mat, so it's going to work great. What if you don't have a super sticky mat? What if you have just a standard mat? Well, here's a standard mat, and it's the mat I used. It's pretty big, right? It's 12 by 24. And I left the background on. This is where I cut all the circles that went on to my quilt that I made. And all of these circles went at the intersections, just like they show in the pattern. Now, this is a standard mat. If I wanted a mat to be a standard mat to hold this fabric great, what I could do is get a fabric mat, or there's another option. Say you have a standard mat that's gone around the block a little bit. You've cut quite a bit on it, but you still want to use it. What you can do, if it's still got some stick to it, is you can get some fabric support sheets. 4 of them come in a package. Now what these do, you stick these on top of your standard mat, and it becomes a super sticky fabric mat. And you could use that mat over and over as long as it's going to hold these on it. So that's a pretty good option to take a mat that's kind of getting a little, you know, and take it so that it's great for doing this with the fabric. So I put my stabilizer on this. This is just a 12 by 12 mat. I cut the stabilizer. It extends beyond the one edge, but that's okay. And I did take a brayer and I made sure it was put down really, really well. And I put my rotary blade in the Scan and Cut. Now, all we really need to do, I think I'm only going to cut one of these, right? So I don't think I need 2. So let's take this other one. Okay, and let's just delete that one. And we'll just cut the one that I created. So now all I have to do is say, okay, okay, I want to cut this out, cut, and it's figuring it out. Now it knows I have the rotary blade in there, right? I don't have to do anything else. It's amazing. I could test. I've actually done this a bit, so I know it's going to work. I'm just going to hit start. I think it's going to take about 2 or 3 minutes to cut it. It would cut them all if I had them all on there. The rotary blade's going to take a teeny little bit more time because as it cuts, it reorients itself. I could also use a fabric blade on this, but the rotary blade is made for super thin, the stabilizer that I'm using. Let's get to cutting. That was fast. So let me show you what we do when we're getting ready to put this together and get it all set up to go to the sewing machine. So I'm taking my scissors and I'm just cutting the inside of that frame. Like I said, I already did. Oh, here's what it looks like. Oh, I forgot to show you. So here it is. Take your little spatula. Now it's not fragile, but remember this is a tearaway stabilizer. So we want to be a little careful with it. We take it off and it just comes right off. We get out under that little corner. Oh my goodness. Remember, I cut the stabilizer with the fusible side up. There's my one window. There's my second window. This will go on the background fabric, and this will go on my applique piece. And the part in the middle, yeah, you can just use it for maybe a very small stabilizer project. Okay, so here's my little window. I roughly cut out the inside because it doesn't matter. And I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to come on in and I'm going to clip to these curves. Notice how beautifully that got cut on the Scan and Cut. I probably couldn't do that if I was just tracing it out. And I can make a fancy window for my applique. I'm going to clip on in just shy of that frame on the outside edge. And of course I ironed it down to the back of the fabric. All right, so now all of my little edges have been clipped. Let's take this off. There we go. Okay, so now I take my glue stick, my mighty glue stick. Now this is just a children's school glue stick. It's the disappearing blue ink, and it doesn't, I've never found it to hurt my fabric. I'm going to put a thing of glue here and a thing of glue here. And I'm just going to take the fabric and pull it over so that I have a nice crisp edge on that inside. I got my glue stick at the very inexpensive store. I think you know what I'm talking about. All right, my window has been created. There it is. And if you can see, it's absolutely perfect. Now let's find my applique that goes on the inside. Here's what's going to happen. I've ironed that inner ring on the back, and this inner ring is going to match perfectly with that outer ring. So I'm going to turn it over and make sure that that inner ring is matching perfectly. And what does that do for me? Well, what it does is it makes sure that I have my image exactly centered. I have put my outer frame in there and it's perfectly aligned. And I can double check, is that the way I want him to go? I don't think so. Let me turn him upside down. That's the way I want him to go. And once I have it all aligned exactly where I want it to be, I'm just going to take my glue stick, put some glue along the edge, and glue it in place. And perfectly ready to go. I've already done that to Grandma, and here's Grandma. She's ready to go. And I'm going to take her over to the Stellaire and I'm going to sew her down. But before we go, I want to refresh you on one thing that the Scan and Cut can do when it has the connection, my connection with the Stellaire. So let me show you that real quick before we go over there. Okay. What I can do with my connection is I can send these shapes over to the Stellaire to create an embroidery. So what I've done is I've done that on this quilt and I created the circles, but I also created a fancy extra border around there. I'm going to show you on the Stellaire how I did the fancy border. But first we have to send this artwork to the machine. It's real simple on the scan and cut. Here we go. We're going to go back home. Okay. And we're going to go to My Connection, which is right here. Now I'm going to send a pattern to the Stellaire. And I did a fancy circle outside. Let's see, let me find it again. That's the one I want right there. I'm going to take that and I can modify the size. And I hit set. And I can see the size that it is. And I did that also for my circle. I'm going to transfer it to the machine. So all I have to do is hit transfer. And now that artwork has been sent to the Stellaire. And I'm going to use that for a traditional applique. And I already have my circle there. So let's go to the Stellaire. I'm going to show you how I sew this down. Now I could do it with an embroidery. I'm just going to do it the regular way with a regular fancy E-stitch. But I want to show you how I did those circles too. So I'm going to meet you at the Stellaire and we're going to sew Grandma together. So we've done our scan and cut work and now we're here at the Stellaire. Now I'm going to sew this reverse applique in. I'm going to sew Grandma in and I'm going to do it manually. Now remember, I could have sent that perfect outline over and created a really neat way to sew it down with embroidery. I just wanted to show you how we can do it with just regular sewing. But I went ahead and did this one, and this is the one I cut just now, and I sewed it down with this nice little E-stitch. Now my goal is to have the stitching right along in here and the thread coming out on the side. And I used this very fine thread. This is the Quilter's Select Para Cotton Poly, and I did it in yellow so that you can see it. Now when I do this and I don't want it to show, I'm going to do it in a matching thread. So now let's do Grandma and we'll do this same stitch in a matching thread. So to set up the machine, I have put my matching thread in the machine and I've got it all threaded up. I do have stitch. I chose stitch number 204 on the Stellaire, and that's this stitch right here. It's like an E buttonhole type stitch. 203 is the one that goes back and forth and back and forth. Remember, I don't want a heavy line to go around my applique, so I chose 204 because it just does stitch, side, side, stitch, and that's perfect. I didn't modify it or anything. I do have the pivot feature engaged. Now I can also engage my LED guide light, and I can move it over so that it's right along the edge of that, because I want to be right along the edge. I want to be right along the edge in here. So that might help me and to know where I need to go. I've also put on the machine, I've also put an open toe foot. Now there's lots of different open toe feet that are available for the machine. There's a nice plastic one. This just happens to be a metal one, and I really like it. So here we go. I have my LED guide light. I'm going to lower my foot and I know exactly where I need to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew around this, just going on the inside of that applique. Now when I stop, my pivot feature really helps me turn this corner. And of course I'm going to go all the way around, but I wanted you to see, now there it is with matching thread. Pretty trick, right? All you see is Grandma in a nice little frame. She's indented inside, and I think that looks really good. So for a memory quilt, I think that's like the way to go. Now remember, this window technique, I did it within the block. But you don't really have to do it within the block. You could make a quilt and put it wherever you wanted to. Now the quilt that I have in your handout, I call it Connect the Dots. And what I did is I put it, and I did the connections. I did the intersections like the cornerstones, and I did an applique with a circle, and I made that fancy design on the outside that I showed you that I sent over that image from the Scan and Cut with my connection. Now I did my circles. Circles are pretty easy. I just created a circle. I think it's a 3-inch circle that went in the cornerstones, and I created it with My Design Center. I just did it with My Design Center, just this basic circle, pretty easy. But this fancy shape around here is what I really needed to have coming over from that, from the Scan and Cut. So let me show you basically how I created that. So let's go to My Design Center. Now the circle I can just get from, it from the Shapes tab, which is right here. And if I go to the Shapes tab, you can see I have a circle right there, and I just easily do that, make it a 3-inch circle. What I really want is that starburst shape. And you can see I have the Scan and Cut up here, which means this is where I received artwork from the Scan and Cut. If I pull that, you can see that there's my starburst right there that I sent over from the Scan and Cut. So all I do is I choose that. Okay. Now I really just want this to be a straight stitch. I'm just going to come on in, choose my straight stitch. Okay. Turn the bucket. Touch that fancy starburst. Next. And I'm just going to turn this into a beautiful satin stitch with this My Connection feature, and with the fact that it can turn a design into an applique. When I set it, okay. Now there it is. Now I can turn this into an applique myself, even just not the fancy shape. When I come into here, what happens, oops, that's not what I want. When I come into Edit and I come into this Applique button, the new thing is the Applique patch. Remember, I did a whole video on this, so go back and get more detail on that. But there's that. There it is. I choose it. And when I go next, this is where I can turn it automatically into an applique. Now I just want that satin stitch though. So I'm going to select that satin stitch, and I made it kind of beefy. I think I made it 0.2 is what I made it. Okay. And let's go preview. Now see how it turned that into an applique. I really don't want that. I really just want that pretty satin stitch, and it does a super good job. So I don't really need this placement. I turn that off. I don't really need that. I turn it off. All I want is that really pretty satin stitch. Okay, and there it is. So I did that, and I did it on top of the circle. And I hope you can see. Let's bring it up so that you can see. Look at how gorgeous that really big satin stitch is. This center circle, just like I did the starburst, I did that, and I created an applique that was that circle. That circle got sent off to the Scan and Cut. And you saw all the circles I cut on that 12 by 24 mat? That's exactly how I did that. Pretty neat, pretty fast. Now, all I have to do is stitch the last one of these. I'm going to do that. I'm going to send it off to George. I hope you enjoyed kind of exploring the connection between printing your fabric with an image, you're making a memory quilt, taking it to the Scan and Cut, creating that reverse applique frames, and on the machine I can either sew it just manually, or I could create a fabulous embroidery to stitch it down to. I could do whatever I want. But to send it off to George, I have to stitch my last one, and thanks for watching.
Thanks, Kathy. That was an incredible presentation. And so let's go over the special offer we have on the Brother Stellaire series. So we have the XJ2, which is their combination sewing and embroidery, and the XE2, which is dedicated embroidery. They both share the same embroidery features, which is a large 9.5 by 14-inch embroidery area with over 780 built-in embroidery designs, and of them, over 100 of them are Disney. It also has over 30 fonts and large, beautiful monograms. And with the fonts, you can edit in all kinds of arrangements. You can arc, you can array, you can even cut and paste and kern it in some custom ways. Speaking of customization, you can take a design and do an automatic applique around it. And with the matrix copy, you can copy this very quickly to make patches, and if we had the scan and cut, we can actually send it to the scan and cut out those patches, and then embroider them beautifully. An additional advanced technology is a new 2-point laser positioning. I can take something like a name and position it perfectly on a line. I can use it to do multiple hoopings and match them perfectly. I can even use it for edge-to-edge quilting. Now, part of what the Stellaire series offers is a special relationship with the scan and cut. They actually can marry together, so I can send an applique design right from my machine and it will cut it out perfectly for beautiful applique. But better yet, I can send a design from my scan and cut and turn it into embroidery. It also unlocks a new feature where I can choose one of the colors of my design, whether if it's a built-in design, I can choose that and turn it into applique. But let's take that heart that I sent over. I turn it into embroidery. I select the color, and now it's applique. Now let's bring over the third part of the piece. I want to create my own fabric, and I can do that with Print Moda. I took an image of a rose and I arranged it just in a beautiful kaleidoscope of color. And I printed that fabric and placed it on in the scan and cut. I took my design I created on the Stellaire from the scan and cut, sent it over to the scan and cut it out, and I have one complete embroidery design created with that trifecta of creativity. Now the XJ2 also is a sewing machine, and it has a large 11.25-inch opening, beautiful lighting. It has 760 built-in stitches, from quilting stitches to applique to utility. It even has automatic stippling and some beautiful decorative stitches that are very, very wide. It also has an automatic 1/4 inch feature which moves the needle over a 1/4 inch from the foot, and you can use the laser guidance it has on there so you can just do some beautiful piecing. It also has amazing fabric control with an automatic fabric sensor, and this gives you the ability to sense multiple layers like in denim, or if I want to sew on some sheer fabric like this tricot, I can do that beautifully, or even working with elastics. It handles the fabric beautifully. If it's even more extreme, we can add the digital dual feed. This is a belt-driven feed system that gives perfect contact on the fabric. And so you see here with this marine vinyl, there's no slippage. I also can use it with such things as minky, which is hard to sew with, and of course, quilting. For more information on this incredible product, click on the link to see our current special offer. You can email us at customerservice@moores-sew.com or call us at 1-800-865-9664.